Well, good evening. It's Rian Kutsia speaking here from Fortis Proactive Defense Solutions in Pretoria, South Africa. Tonight, I am speaking to Roux again, and we will be discussing the topic of situational awareness, and very specifically, the OODA loop and the Cooper color code of awareness. Roux, good evening and welcome.
Hi, Rian. Nice to speak to you again.
Yeah, it's always good. Roux, I'm gonna just kick off. Let's get this going. Can you explain to me in a little bit more detail the 4 stages of the OODA loop and how each step contributes to making effective decisions in dynamic situations?
Of course. So the first thing to know is that the OODA loop was developed for combat scenarios by an American Air Force colonel by the name of John Boyd. And the OODA loop is actually an acronym. So OODA is spelled OODA, and each of those letters represent something. So the first O represents observation, the second O represents orientation, the D represents decision making, and the A represents action. Now, this cycle of things that happen is a cycle that you go through many times every day. It's a cycle that happens every time you have to brake for a red light at an intersection. It's a cycle that happens every time that you hear something fall in the kitchen. It's a cycle that happens if you knock something off a table, for instance. So you go through it many times a day in non-combat situations. Key is understanding that this cycle was defined and actually realized by someone in a combat setting, for a combat setting. And so when you are attacked by someone and they want to rob you or they want to hurt you, this is also the cycle that you have to go through in order for you to start doing any type of action, whether that action is running away or getting away, escaping, or whether that action is engaging in the fight. So the first step of the OODA loop, the observation part, is one of the things that many people get wrong, especially in South Africa, where people go through the day blissfully unaware of what's happening around them. So they fail to observe the threat coming to them. And that means if you don't observe, then there's nothing that you can do. If you don't observe the threat, they are on you, they close distance, they get close to you, and then they control the situation. So the first thing that you have to do in any scenario is to observe. And that means you have to be aware of what's going on around you. So observation means keeping your head on a swivel. It means looking around. It means trying to identify people and scenarios that may become a threat to you. The second letter, the O for orientation, is now after you've observed a potentially threatening thing, a person or a scenario or a vehicle or anything of that sort. Now you have to orient yourself to that threat. That means you have to in some way turn your body, turn your head. You have to shift your eyes. You have to shift your attention from what you were doing and focus this on what is now a potential threat. What's important here is to do that quickly. You can't be lazy in observation. You can't be lazy in looking around. So many people often play this game where they make as though they're going to hit you, and then you flinch, and then they laugh at you, and that's actually wrong. You know, they shouldn't laugh at you. The fact that you are reacting so quickly to a perceived threat is actually a very good thing, by the way. So then the third letter, the D for deciding. This is where tactical training comes in, which you and I spoke about previously. And observing the threat and taking in the situation and taking in the information in front of you then has to go into your brain, and you have to work with that and make a decision. What is the correct thing to do for me in this scenario? Do I run away? Am I outgunned, outnumbered? Am I staring at 10 guys with machine guns? And in that case, I don't know about you, but I'm probably not going to draw my gun and start firing unless I absolutely have to. I'm probably going to try and run away. Or is it someone who's hurting one of my loved ones? Is it someone who's running away with the laptop back? What is the situation, and what is my correct course of action? And this is where tactical training comes in. And we spoke about that for a long time last time. So that's deciding what to do. And that's very important because you can also decide to do the wrong thing, and we'll get to that. And then the last one is action. And then this is where your training again needs to kick in, because once you have decided to do a certain action, then you can't be fumbling with your firearm, you can't be struggling to dial a number, you can't be struggling to get a key into a keyhole, even though that does become very difficult under stress. So action is where you start relying on your subconscious mind, which has been taught a set of skills on the shooting range and in classrooms and whatever. And now you start relying on this to automatically just happen. You've made the decision, I'm going to draw my firearm and fire, and then that has to happen automatically. You can't think about that. You're not going to worry about it. You're not going to wonder, is my gun loaded? Yeah, well, how does the trigger work? That all has to be in what we call muscle memory. So those 4 letters are all equally important, and each of them have their own way of training them. You train each of those letters, your decision making, your action, your orientation, and your observation. You train each of those in a different way, but they're all equally important. And once, say for instance, you've now perceived a threat and you've gone through the OODA loop, and you've done your first action, the OODA loop doesn't stop. You carry on doing the OODA loop until you've either gotten away from the threat and escaped successfully, or you've actually won the fight, or you've lost the fight, in which case you're going to stop doing the OODA loop. But if you get away, and if you're in the fight, you're going to carry on doing the OODA loop on a continuous basis, because your attackers might change. They might duck behind cover. There might be cars driving in between you and your attackers. The situation may change, and that means you have to be mentally flexible enough to do the OODA loop over and over and over again until the situation has reached the conclusion.
So I want to quickly just touch on the second O, the orientation part of the OODA loop. How does that impact on the speed and the accuracy of your decision making? And would you say it can be considered as maybe the most crucial part of the whole OODA loop?
It can be. Remember, there are sequential things that happen. So you have to observe first, then orient, then decide, then act. If you don't observe, then you can't orient. And if you can't orient yourself towards the threat, then you also can't make a decision. And if you don't make a decision, then you're certainly not going to act. What we train at Fortis on the range is to orient yourself as soon as you can. So we don't speak in terms of doing anything fast. We speak in terms of doing it soon. And when you think about orientation, there's a big fitness element coming into this. The physically fitter you are, the faster you can orient, and the faster you can get yourself physically into a position to start doing actions once you've made the decision. I'm assuming that making a decision comes relatively quickly. It may not be, but let's say for the moment that your decision making is fast. Then the whole speed at which you get to action is determined by orientation. Remember, observation is often very quickly. You hear a gunshot or you see something out of the corner of the eye, and that's observation. It's usually the orientation part that takes the longest, because you are slow in turning. You are slow in turning your head. You ignore things. In South Africa, on the roads especially, we learn to ignore people driving like hooligans. So often, you may hear something, but you choose to ignore it, or you choose not to orient yourself, and that's a big thing that slows you down. So orientation absolutely can be seen as a very important, if not the most important part, because it determines actually a big part of how fast I can get to doing an action. Absolutely. But physical fitness plays a role. Your situation also plays a role. If you're in a car, orientation may take the form of turning the steering wheel. And if you don't, if you need to orient yourself and that vehicle into a position where inside of the vehicle, you've got an opportunity to either get away or resolve the situation somehow. So absolutely, it's a very important part, if not the most important part. And I think in my mind, it determines the overall speed of the whole cycle.
Okay. Well, I think that answers my question in full. I want to move over now to the Cooper color code. Can you maybe just give us a little bit of background about the Cooper color code, the purpose, and an explanation of what each color in the code represents?
Of course. So the Cooper's color codes of awareness links very closely to the OODA loop. It was also incidentally developed by a US Army Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Cooper. He's a very influential, very credible person in the firearms industry. You know, there's very few people that are serious about firearms that don't know the name Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Cooper. He was a very influential handgun trainer as well in the US. He developed this color code system which ranges from white all the way through to red, and later on there was a black added as well to this code, and it basically increases in shades of color. So the color code goes white, yellow, orange, red, and then, like I say, later black was also added, although it wasn't part of the original color code. So this color code is meant to represent your level of awareness, and it's actually supposed to be relatively intuitive. So if you see the color, it should tell you on a instinctive level what that represents. So let's take the color white. That is when your awareness level is completely unaware. You are completely unaware of what's happening around you, and the only time that you should actually be in color code white is when you are sleeping. Right? I mean, we are not all trained military personnel or highly trained ninjas or whatever. I mean, when I sleep, I'm pretty much dead to the world. So, and there's very little that you can do about that. I mean, I'm not trained to wake at the sound of a twig breaking, you know, in my own house. There's a level of comfort. So white is when you're sleeping, but that's actually the only time that the color code white is permissible in your daily, you know, to and fro. The next color code is where you should be at the moment you wake up until the moment that you go to bed. And this is difficult because throughout the course of the day, our levels of awareness fluctuate. I mean, when you're tired after work, you tend to, in the car, on the way, in traffic, you tend to go back into white. And that's why many people get hijacked or attacked, especially at night. It's after a long day, you're tired, you're mentally switching off already. But so yellow means relaxed awareness. So relaxed awareness is, I'm not focused on one particular thing, but I am aware of everything that's happening around me. I'm aware of people moving by me. I'm aware of things falling. I'm aware of cars. I'm really aware, but nothing has popped out as being a potential threat yet. But if something does, I'm going to see it immediately because I am aware of everything that's happening around me. Now, this yellow actually.
Can I just say, I think the emphasis with this state, specifically yellow, is the relaxed awareness.
Correct.
As opposed to feeling all tensed up and, you know, feeling yes,
paranoid or tense. Absolutely. So you're not strung as a wire. Okay, you're looking around you, but you're not. I mean, your shoulders aren't hunched up. You're not expecting a threat in that sense, right? But you are aware of everything happening around you. Absolutely, relaxed awareness. Then, as soon as you do notice something that may become a potential threat, I then escalate my level of awareness into orange. Now, orange means focused awareness. So now I'm aware of one particular thing that may become a threat or is a threat already, but I'm now focused on that thing. So say, for instance, you're in a restaurant and someone walks in, they're wearing a hoodie, they're hiding their hands, they're hunched over, you can't see their face, they don't fit. Then automatically I go into orange because this person may actually be a threat and start doing something or hurting someone. You know, it's just an example. But that's when I start focusing. Then when that potential threat turns out to be a real threat, now I need to jump into action. Right? So this means either engaging with a threat or escaping. But it doesn't matter which of the two it is. When I'm in red, I'm taking action. I'm actually physically moving. And I'm trying to either get away or win the fight. Now, black was brought in to represent, and just as a note, when you are in the red state of awareness, you have to resolve the situation in red. You cannot afford to go beyond red. In red, you either escape or you win the fight. As soon as you move to the black level of awareness, this represents losing the fight. So I've now been injured, I'm losing blood, I'm losing the ability to fight back, and I'm losing the ability to escape. So that's where you don't want to go. You need to finish the scenario in red. Now, this links up with the OODA loop very, very well, because in the yellow state of awareness, in relaxed awareness, I am responsible for observation, the first O of the OODA loop.
Yes.
When I observe something that may be a potential threat, I go over into orange, which is focused awareness. And this is also where I orient myself towards a potential threat. The decision-making also happens in orange, because now I'm perceiving this threat, I'm absorbing the situation, and I now need to decide what to do. So observation happens in yellow. Orientation and decision-making happens in orange. And when I start acting, then I'm in red. So these two systems, the OODA loop and the Cooper's color codes of awareness, talk to each other very, very well. And I need to understand the one, because the OODA loop is a cycle, whereas the color codes of awareness is less of a cycle. You know, I will go through a complete OODA loop, and then if there wasn't a threat, I will back into yellow. But I won't go from yellow to orange to red and then back into yellow quite quickly. You know, usually if you make it to red and you need to escape or a dangerous situation or fight your way out, it's going to take a day or two for you to get back to a yellow or a white. You know, you're going to be so worked up. So these two systems work hand in hand, and you need to understand them. And the color codes of awareness is a good way for you to ask yourself throughout the course of the day. You know, if you catch yourself, oh, I'm in white. You know, just bump up your level of awareness, give a look around, especially if you're in the car. I mean, in South Africa, we've got so many hijackings and vehicle-based crime. When you're in the car, to look around, keep your head on a swivel, check your blind spots, check your mirror, see who's around you. Often you hear people say, well, the hijackers came out of nowhere. And they didn't come out of nowhere. You were just not observant enough to see them coming. And if you did see them coming, you probably did have more than enough time to do something. So if you catch yourself in white, snap out of it, and don't hesitate. Remember, the Cooper's color codes of awareness is not a commitment to go into a fight. You know, you can, from yellow, you don't have to hesitate to go into orange. You know, focus quickly. If you hear something, go into orange immediately. You know, it can save your life. And that's where, like you say, on the OODA loop, where the orientation is so important. Because if you can orient yourself towards a threat very quickly, then you buy yourself time to actually deal with the situation. And that's why going into orange, don't hesitate. You can go into orange any time of the day, anywhere. It's not committing to a fight, and you don't even have to portray that you are going into orange. Going into orange may be as simple as not looking around anymore, but now just looking at a specific thing. Then you're in orange already. So no, two very good systems that have been developed by combat professionals, for combat professionals, and for now people in civilian life adopting these systems to, you know, combat crime and make themselves safe against scenarios that can hurt them.
Yes. So, well, maybe as an example, I'm just sitting here thinking of today, coming back home. There's a primary school just a couple of blocks away. So as I turned the corner, I saw that the school has now come out, and the street was just filled with small kids, like, you know, the little babies, the grade 1s and grade 2s. And there were a lot of them on both sides of the road, and too few teachers to really keep an eye on it. So for me, that is part of the OODA loop. So you can apply it anywhere. It's not necessarily for a self-defense situation. It's literally anywhere. So I was observing, then I realized this is a potential problem, where I went from observing to orientating to making a decision, and my decision was to travel through that block at literally 10 kilometers an hour.
Correct.
So from yellow, where I observed, I saw this, into orange, where I just took a preventative. Well, it's not. I didn't even
any action,
break the
any
sweat.
action, just
It's
braking. I mean,
just
if you come around the corner,
it's really just to prevent myself from having to escalate into red, realizing there's a child in the road, and having to slam on the brakes in a full-blown panic stop. So it's literally something that you use anywhere, all the time, for any kind of situation.
absolutely. And in the case of a collision or a potential collision, I think you are in red. I mean, you are heavily focused. You know what the consequences are of colliding with a pedestrian. So definitely, I mean, even slamming brakes is red. You're dealing with a situation in a way that requires at that point you to take action and give that action all of your attention. So no, it's applicable to people who don't carry firearms. It's applicable to people who aren't even armed yet, who are still on this journey of developing skills and getting the tools for self-defense. If you're waiting for your license to come, you can still make use of the OODA loop and the Cooper's color codes of awareness. And remember, drawing a firearm and engaging in a firefight is your last avenue. You want to use the OODA loop and Cooper's color codes of awareness to get out of a situation before you even have to draw your weapon. And in that sense, if someone is unarmed, but they are employing the OODA loop and the Cooper's color codes correctly, they won't even need a firearm. The problem is when people are typically, I'm saying it's not always, obviously, but most of the time, people are caught in situations where they are at risk of being attacked or being attacked because they are not observant enough and they did not orient themselves towards a threat fast enough. And they also don't know what the correct decisions are to make. And if you can marry observing correctly, orientating correctly, and deciding correctly up with escalating your levels of awareness fast enough as your situation becomes more clear to you, then that's, I would say, even a more powerful weapon than carrying a firearm. Absolutely. And it all comes down to awareness.
So I think to summarize it, both these systems and working these systems in conjunction with each other is fully aimed at decreasing your odds of getting into trouble and increasing your odds of safely getting out of trouble.
Yeah, correct. Absolutely. And getting out of trouble. That's the objective. Yeah.
And you guys spend a lot of time talking about this and hammering the principles into students during the course of a year that the loan operator course lasts for, right?
On every module. Of course, we start off and we discuss this during the first module because it's so important, the fundamentals. But we hammer on this with every module because as you progress throughout the course of the year, the shooting exercises now start involving a measure of every one of the aspects of the OODA loop. You have to observe, you have to orient, you have to decide. Often we shoot at different size targets, different color targets. Often the instruction to shoot at a specific target is coming to you in that moment while you are already shooting. So you being able to go through the OODA loop fast enough to observe what the instructor is telling you to fire at, then orienting yourself towards that target, deciding how far the target is, deciding whether my sight picture is acceptable or not, and then actually taking the action. That all becomes so entrained in everything that we do, and we hammer on it on every course. Your OODA loop needs to flow without hesitation. And of course, on a shooting range, most people are already in a very high state of awareness, and I think it's important for them to carry that state of awareness with them into their normal lives. You see too many people on the shooting range; they're very aware and they're with it, and the draw stroke of their handgun looks good and they move well and they identify and fire at targets quickly and accurately. But unfortunately, they leave that mindset and that mindset, they leave it on the range and they go home and they put their firearm in the safe, and then they carry on during the week as though, as though nothing is going to happen to them, and they lose all of that situational awareness. So bringing that level of awareness with you home after the shooting range is a big aspect of what makes you a good self-defense practitioner.
Make it literally a lifestyle.
Of course, it has to be a lifestyle. The mindset has to be a lifestyle. When you wake up in the morning, you have to think to yourself, okay, I'm in yellow. I'm going to drive to work in yellow. I'm going to be in yellow. And at the faintest whisper of trouble, make sure you jump into orange as soon as you can. See what's going on. Orient yourself towards the target. As I say, the target. Orient yourself towards the situation, towards this thing that's happening that may become a threat as quickly as possible. It can save your life.
Roux, thank you so much. I think there's a lot of value in what you said tonight. And for our viewers, I hope once again that you find a lot of value in this. If you do and you liked it, kindly remember to press the like button and subscribe to the channel. Help us grow it so that we can reach more people with our message. Roux, thank you once again for your time. Have a great evening. We'll talk again soon.
No problem. Thanks, Rian. Good talking to you.